All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Let's call the December 5th meeting of the Environmental Resources Committee to order. We'll begin with item number one, or item number two, pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll move to item number three, public comment. We didn't have anybody signed up for general public comment today, so we'll move on to item number four, approval of the October 31st, 2023 committee minutes. Motion by Supervisor Ritter, second by Supervisor Scherfinski to approve. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Moving on to 5, special education. 5A, DNR information related to digesters in Marathon County. The agenda looks a little bit different this month. We want to accommodate our partners at the Department of Natural Resources to be able to present in a timely fashion, so we're going to have them go first before our rezones today. I'm going to hand it off to staff if they'd like to kick things off.
Good afternoon, everyone. For those that don't know me, I'm Kirsty Heidenreich. I'm the county conservationist. I am so happy to have with us today 3 DNR professionals who are here to not only answer some of your questions related to digester discussion, but also provide a little bit of education related to site-specific information, and then just also related to digesters in Wisconsin in general. So 2 of our DNR colleagues are out of the Madison office, so they will be joining us virtually this afternoon. So I do have Adam Freehofer online, and he's going to be kind of kicking off this educational session with a little bit of information related to some groundwater and geology information of the site. And then Mark will go after him, and we work with Mark frequently in our conservation department. So Mark is over the CAFO program, our large farm program for Marathon County, and he's been a wonderful partner to work with on these large farms. So we appreciate the work that these folks do, not only in our county, but around Wisconsin. So I'll let each of them introduce themselves and give a little bit more information on what they do specifically, because I don't want to mess that up. So Adam, if you're online, do you want to share your screen? And you can start your slides. Otherwise, we're happy to share your slides here as well.
All right, can you guys see that?
Do we have to do it on our end?
We might have to change it on there to.
Looks like we have to maybe do it on our end, Adam.
Okay, that's okay. Can you guys hear me okay?
You sound great.
Okay.
Perfect.
So do we want to do introductions first, or do you just want me to kick it off and we can get rolling with each of us from DNR?
Yeah, why don't you just introduce yourself, and we can have Mark and Bernie introduce themselves before they speak
Sure.
as well.
All right, I'm Adam Freihaffer. I'm the water use program manager at the Wisconsin DNR. We're based out of Madison, and our duty at DNR is to oversee water quantity, regulation, and management. And as we'll talk a little bit today, with respect to large dairies, digesters, all things that can be a struggle in parts of Marathon County. So that's part of the educational piece today. Did you say Bernie and Mark? Did you guys want to do introductions, or are we going to jump into this right now? I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I would say just go ahead and jump into it, Adam.
All right. Okay. Well, it's my understanding that part of the question being looked at today and in Marathon County as a whole is the question of introduction of manure digesters on dairies, and that's not necessarily new news in Wisconsin. That has been done in other counties, but the one piece that I wanted to cover with respect to water use, you might be asking, why are we talking about water use when we're talking about manure digesters? Well, there is overlap. And my understanding is one of the farms that's considering this is Vandergeest Dairy. And Vandergeest Dairy is not far from Wausau, and it's one of the properties that the high capacity well program that I oversee issued an approval to recently. And I would say in all my years, 10 years, 12, I don't know, 11 years in the program, I'd say this is one of the more challenging ones I've ever issued, and certainly one of the ones with the most conditions or limitations to it. And that really stems from the water quantity issues that exist in Western Marathon County. The difference between Western and Eastern Marathon County is stark with respect to geology and your ability to put a straw in the ground and pull water out. It's much different. So it's a bit of a tale of two pieces of the county. And with Vandergeest, you can see on the image on the left on the screen, maybe a little hard to see, but all the blue dots are high capacity wells. Now, most dairies will need a couple of wells to meet all their operational needs. Getting the cows water, washing things off, potable water for the milk production, water if it's needed for a digester, whatever it needs, you need a couple wells. Well, in the Vandergeest dairy situation, they have 18, and they're at a point where they're putting wells further to the north and piping water down to the southern part of their facility. And they're doing that, again, because this is not a very high producing water area of the county and of the state. Parts of Taylor, Clark, and Western Marathon don't yield a lot of water. And so when we looked at this, they came in for a couple of years ago, they came in for 3 wells. Those are the orange dots on the map. The pink line is the property boundary. And they came in for 3 new wells. And they said, Adam, we want these new wells. We want to expand. They were working with the CAFO program at the time to get the CAFO permits to expand their facility, but they also needed water, right? And when we looked at it, we said, well, we have concerns. And our concerns are this: if you use too much water and you pump too hard, you have the potential to take out your neighbor's residential or private well. And in a lot of cases in the state, you turn off that well, Vandergeest stop pumping. They stop pumping from that well that's causing the harm, and the residential well recovers. It fixes itself within a day, 2, 3 days. In this area of the state, that may not be the case. You trap the well, there's not a quick remedy. You're trucking water at that point. And that's both an environmental and a political situation that no one really wants. And so we have to look at the potential harm to private wells. And we also looked at the harm to Silver Creek that runs through that property, which is a productive stream in that region. So what we ended up with Vandergeest was we said, you can have up to 12 million gallons. It sounds like a lot of water, but in relative compared to other properties across the state, it's pretty small. 12 million gallons at any 30-day period across your entire property. And then we also said, well, there's a lot of risk to private wells in those northern wells, so we limited what they could pump in those northern wells to 4 million gallons in any 30 days. So we said you got to put on meters on your wells. You really have to watch your water use. So they're aware of that. In fact, I just talked to Lee Vandergeest yesterday about this. They know that what they have to do. They also know there's a water challenge. They've tried to drill a couple of those wells that I approved last year, and they couldn't get water out of them. So there's a struggle with water in this region. In 2022, they used a small fraction, 33% of what they were limited to that I put in that approval. But in drier periods, that is obviously going to increase quite a bit. And this story in Vandergeest we're seeing it, all sorts of dairies, Miltram, Maple Ridge, all sorts of dairies across Western Marathon County. So you want to go to the next slide? And this is as nerdy and as sciencey as I'm going to get, I promise you. But it's important, if I can boil it down into a simple idea, that you take away, because it does impact business development in Western Marathon County, because many businesses need 2 things, electricity and water. And this is the challenge with the water side of things. This is a very simplistic cartoon of the geology in Western Marathon County. You have some clay, maybe some sand, some silts. And maybe you have a little bit of sandstone. That's productive. You can get some water out of that. And then you have weathered granite and granite. And granite is not a sponge. If you squeeze it, you're not getting any water out of it. In that granite, you do have fractures. Those are little cracks in the granite. And those can transmit water. But we don't know where they are. And we can guess. We have some ideas. But we don't really know. So they drill a well. They're hoping they hit one of those fractures that can produce water. So the well drillers sometimes are going on a guess. And they try to guess right, and sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. The question then becomes, what are those fractures? Let's say the well driller they want to put in a digester. A digester needs so much water. They hit one of those fractures. Great. They're producing water. What else is that fracture connected to? Is it connected to a private well? So if they pump from that fracture, they're also drying up a private well. It's hard to know. So what I always tell people in this region is this is high risk, high uncertainty. The risk comes from you could impact other things that you're not aware of. You may not even have enough water to sustain your immediate need. And there's high uncertainty. We don't really know all that much about the granite below our feet, where it's fractured or not. We know it doesn't produce a lot of water unless you're in one of those fractures, those cracks, but that's about it. So going to school up in Stevens Point, I know enough about Marathon County. I know that because of that clay, that water runs off. There's not a lot of recharge into the ground, not a lot of groundwater, water that goes back into the ground. So what's under your feet is valuable. So you want to use it and use it well. Again, I'm bringing these things up because this plays into water use and how much, when we get into the question of digesters, of how much water is being used by digesters, it's really product specific. It's really model specific on the digester side. Some of them use a bit of water. I don't know. I'm not sure about that question. I just want to give you the context for the geology and the constraints that we see in this part of the county. Next slide, please. So this is just shows you larger wells in Marathon County. These are what we term high capacity, or the property has the capacity to withdraw up to 70 gallons per minute with combined wells. The dark blue wells are municipal. So those are your municipal water supply wells. And the light blue are the private private high capacity wells. You can see there's a lot more in eastern Marathon County than there is throughout the rest. And that's all because of that geology that I just talked about. And you can see there's a lot along the Wisconsin River in the Wausau area. And that's because that's sand and gravel. That produces a lot of water. We don't see as many elsewhere. So that just gives you an idea of the struggle. Whereas if you drop down to, let's say, Portage County, you can barely, if I showed you a map like this, you could barely see the map. It's so covered in wells because that's much more productive. So it's a challenge we have. It's not completely limiting in the sense that I'm not saying there's no water. I'm just saying we have to be cognizant of it when we make decisions about water use needs in this county. Next slide. And lastly, I know this question has come up before, is what is the risk of the water use with respect to the municipal wells? And that's something the department reviews when we get a high capacity well application in. So when the Vandergeest property submitted their application in 2021, 2022, and I reviewed it, one of the considerations I made was for the Village of Maine wells. Were they going to be impacted? Because obviously we don't want to have an impact to a municipal water supply well. You leave a much larger population exposed without water. Residential wells are bad enough. So that's one of the things we're protective of when we conduct our technical reviews as a department, is can we approve the proposed wells, the proposed water use with respect to potential harm to residential wells, municipal wells, things like that. So there wasn't, I didn't see a harm or risk to the Village of Maine wells when I issued that decision. So that's really all I've got. If there's questions, I just wanted to set the tone for the water use side. And obviously my colleagues in the CAPO program will give you more of the digester specific information.
Would you like to take any immediate questions now, or would you like Mark to do his short presentation?
If there's some questions, I'm happy to take them quick.
Okay. 1 second, Supervisor Finsky. So Chair Gibbs is here as well as Supervisor Lemmer. County board members that aren't on ERC, please raise your hand and you can be recognized to ask questions. I just want to make that clear. I don't see any other supervisors in this room. So I just want to make that clear before we get to the questions part. Supervisor Shafinsky.
Thank you. Very, very good presentation. My one question is, you alluded to the fact that in drier periods, whether it's drought or just dry, that the water usage would go up, and you just sort of glossed over with the word considerably. Do you have some figures that you can share on what that means? I mean, are they going from 30% usage to 50% usage, or is it 60 or 70% usage?
That's a great question. So when I looked at Vandergeest, what I did is I had to look at their max month. and their max month, it's usually during drier conditions, so maybe that was 2013. We have about a little over 10 years of water use reporting data. And so, you're closer to 60%. And some of these dairies, depending on the water use sector, depending on what, some dairies or some facilities are more consistent regardless of the weather. Some need to run their sprinklers for their animals to cool them off, and that's where you see that water use increase. So we go from 30 to 50 to 60. Yeah, I think that's safe to say. So when I look at the applications for high capacity wells, I have to consider their business need. And one of the things that helps me understand that is what's their max month? What was the most they've ever used in the last decade? Now, it'll be interesting to see what happened in 2023 as we went through a more of a statewide drought and look at that water use. I won't have that in front of me until early 2024. But that's what we'll be evaluating as we go as well, is what happens during these drier periods. So that's what I did. I would say it's probably more consistent with 50 to 60% of their total capacity.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Marilyn, go ahead.
Question is, if they increase their dairy size, more animals, would they need more high-capacity wells? And are there more high-capacity wells that can be on their site without doing damage to other wells?
You've asked the $1 million question. That is the conversation I'm having, where our whole team is having with dairies in Western Marathon County right now. We're not saying you can't expand. We're saying you need to think about the water up front. This can't be an afterthought. And it generally kind of has been. It's like, well, yeah, we can get water. It's fine. Let's put more wells in. And we're saying, no, that may not be the case. We're not saying you can't do it. We're just saying sometimes it's going to need some more creative thinking. Like in Vandergeest's case, we might say you might have to put wells further to the north on your property and pipe the water. We might have to be creative about where we put them and how we use that water. So I'm not saying they can't have it. I'm just saying they need to think carefully. In some other cases, I'll go back. This is very site specific, case by case specific. We can't say generally these dairies are going to run out of water. We're saying it's got to be something they think about up front, much like they think about the CAFO permitting. And we haven't seen that recently, and we're trying to push that through education. Like, you need to be thinking about this because you have to plan it, because it could be an additional cost, or you might not be able to get it at all. And you don't want to build an expansion and start buying cows if you don't have the water to support it. So it's a good question. I don't have a yes or no. It's just something they need to be thinking about with us, and we want to work with them to try to find a solution.
Supervisor Stravinsky.
Thank you. One additional question, and that is, don't know if we have the data to support any conclusions, but the very large farms are a relatively recent phenomenon. Given this level of usage, do we have any idea if this is sustainable for 20 years, 50 years, 100 years? Any thoughts in that direction at all in terms of long-term sustainability?
Well, when we do high capacity well reviews, we're looking at the impacts. For private wells, we look at the pumping. Most of these wells are pumping year round. We look at the year round impact after a year, and we look at their max, their average, different types of pumping they would do. We assume that we don't factor in what's called recharge, the amount of water that when it rains seeps into the ground. Like I said, in this part of the county, there's not a ton of it because it's clay soils. You guys have seen the rivers when it rains, they're cranking because most of the water's running off and not seeping in. So we do get some runoff, and that will recharge the system. But it's like a bank account. If you're withdrawing more than you're getting in, yeah, the long term could be an issue. But there's a lot of uncertainty here because of those fractures, those fissures, those cracks in the ground. We don't know what's all connected. They're more likely to run out of water in their own well than they are to have a regional drawdown, like a regional cone of depression that you might see in other areas, like other areas of the state. So the issue here may be a little bit different. Their well may go dry. And that's one of the things we plot up, like with Vandergeest. We looked at how many wells were replaced in the last 10, 15 years because they went dry. We don't know why they went dry, but we were able to at least isolate, well, did anyone have to replace their well because it did go dry? So that's one of the things we look at in terms of long-term assessment. So I don't have a good answer for you. We're not running out our analysis for 20, 30 years. But because of the localized fractures of these areas, if you do run into multiple dry years, you could have bigger problems where the demand is high and the water supply is low. But if you get a very productive sandstone seam, like you put your well right in the right spot, the sweet spot in the geology, you might be just fine. It's just so uncertain in this area, so uncertain.
Chair Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the question I have, you mentioned that you've seen an increase in the dry years to a 50 or 60% of what they're authorized to utilize. Did we see any impacts impacting neighbors or the neighborhoods and their wells in those dry years?
Great question. When they were pumping that was, like I said, 2013 maybe, when they were in the high, when we look at their 10-year record of water use for Vandergeest, for example, their higher years were 2013, I think. I would have to go back and look. I'm not sure, we'll have to look at what 2023 was relative to that. I'm not sure if that was as high as they will get in terms of their water use needs. We didn't hear any complaints, but we also don't run a well interference program. Minnesota runs one. We don't, where we would get a call from the public and they would say, my well went dry, help fix it for me. So again, that's why we look at the well construction reports to see if anyone replaced a well because it went dry, because usually that's what people do. They won't call the DNR, they'll just replace their well. They won't realize that it went dry because of pumping. They'll just think it went dry and not really connect the two pieces. So we're not aware of anything, but that's not to say that impacts haven't been made.
Any other questions right now? All right. I think we had some additional information. Okay.
Okay, Mark. Mark has a couple slides as well. Don't forget to introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi, I'm Mark Kazarowski. I'm a regional CAFO specialist with the Wisconsin DNR. And I'm going to just give a brief overview of concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs. And to provide a little context to this, why we're talking about CAFOs, is the vast majority, I think predominantly all digesters are going in on CAFO farms. And Vandergeest, of course, is a permitted CAFO. So CAFOs are regulated under the WPDS, or Wisconsin Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permitting program. And that gets its administrative code from chapter NR 243. So if you're interested in looking up the code or finding more information about that, you can just Google NR 243 and that should come up. Just click, yeah. So a little bit more about my position. I've been in the position for about 7 years. I'm based out of Wausau and cover Marathon County, as well as the other counties depicted on the graphic. And what I do in my job is I do the permit drafting, the issuance, reissuance, as well as all the compliance and implementation of the CAFO permits in my coverage area. So what is a CAFO? So a CAFO is a farm that has 1,000 animal units or more. So an animal unit doesn't mean one animal. So for example, a fully grown milking or dry cow is 1.4 animal units. And a dairy calf is 0.2 animal units. So it's just based on weight and size. There are a few instances where farms can become permitted if they're below that 1,000 animal unit threshold. It's usually due to discharge issues, but that's not very common in the state. And to localize it a little bit, there are currently 14 permitted CAFOs in Marathon County. So the CAFO permitting program is a water quality protection based program. It's based on the federal National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permitting program. We get our authority through the EPA. And an important note is that CAFOs regulate, the CAFO permitting program regulates manure and processed wastewater from CAFOs. It does not address air, odor, noise, or traffic, and is not a siting program. So the take-home point is all the regulations and rules are based on water quality protection. And lastly, I just wanted to put up a graphic of all the CAFOs in the state. You can see Marathon County, they're kind of distributed evenly throughout the county. I think when this graphic was done in January 2023, there were 335 permitted CAFOs in the state, and I think that's closer to 350 now. So and that's a common trend. Every year, the number of CAFOs in the state go up. And I see that trend playing out through Marathon County as well. But yeah, that's really all I had. I just wanted to keep it brief and kind of give a little context and background about CAFOs. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions? Can you provide a general overview of the application process to get CAFO designation?
Yes. So for the first time permitting, the initial step is a preliminary application that the farm will submit, just kind of some basic information. Then, like my position will go out, do a site inspection. We'll identify all the materials needed for the final application, which is like the engineering evaluations of all the reviewable facilities, a 5-year nutrient management plan, a few other things. And then when they submit all that, we review it, and then I draft the permit. It goes out for a 30-day public notice process, and the public has the opportunity to request a public hearing or weigh in, and then we do that if needed, and if not, we issue the permit after that, if they meet all the requirements.
My question is, if they need a permit from the DNR for the CAFO, do they need any permit from the DNR for a digester?
No, it would not be a specific permit. So plans and specs would have to be reviewed by the DNR, so it'd be considered a reviewable facility. So we'd review the plans and specs, but it wouldn't be a separate permit. And one important note too that I forgot to mention is that the DNR is responsible for permitting. The county is not involved in the permitting of CAFOs. They have some authority over the animal waste ordinance as far as like manure storage structures, how they're built, that sort of thing. But the permitting lies under the responsibility of DNR.
With this next question, I want to make it clear, that this is purely for my own information. I don't want to necessarily put CAFOs in a bad light, but have you ever heard of a CAFO permit being denied?
So that gets brought up. So I don't know if there's a CAFO permit that's been denied, but there's been applications withdrawn. So if they meet all the requirements, then we issue the permit. There have been cases where they couldn't meet the requirements, had trouble doing that, and applications were withdrawn. So no, DNR did not officially deny a permit, but because of the conditions that we set forth, the application was withdrawn. So
Okay, thank you.
that answers it.
Follow-up question. Is there any digesters that have been proposed that because of water or whatever else are not approved?
Not that I'm aware of. Bernie, who's on the line, he's a review engineer out of Madison, and he does a lot of the plan and spec review for digesters, so he may be able to weigh in more on that.
Yeah, I'm Bernie Michaud. I'm a CAFO review engineer for the department, and I'm in the Madison office. We have been getting, a fair number of engineering plans submitted to our program for department review and approval, on the order of maybe a half a dozen a year for like the last 5 years. So there's been definitely an uptick in the number of digesters being proposed across the state with CAFOs. To my knowledge, I don't think we've ended up rejecting plans for CAFOs. Certainly in our review, we come across issues that need to be resolved, either more information or adjustments to the plans. to make them compliant. Generally, we've been able to work through those. So, yeah, we haven't rejected any plans for digesters. I can go into that further. After Mark is finished, I can kind of go into a little bit about what goes into the engineering plan review for digesters and their operation.
Sure, thank you. And we have one more question here. So Supervisor Shafinsky. Oh, actually, additional question after that too. But first, Supervisor Shafinsky.
Thank you, Chair. So my question is, I'm not sure that this question makes sense, but I'll ask. Does it make sense to ask what the typical water usage is for a CAFO, or what the range is? I mean, I'm not even, I won't even say familiar with one. I'm aware of one, Vandergeest, that we're discussing today. But I mean, is that typical? Is that on the high end, low end?
I mean, I think it just varies so much based on the size of the farm. So a CAFO can be 1,000 animal units right at that level, or it could be 10,000 animal units. And the biggest water use factor on a farm is the cows drinking it. So, I mean, that is kind of directly correlated to that for the most part, I'd say. Adam, feel free to chime in if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think you're right. I think it's a site-specific herd size thing, and how efficient you are with your water too is another piece of it. And, you know, how you deal with sprinkling, keeping them cool, how you're using your chiller plates for keeping the milk at temperature, things like that. So it's definitely part herd size, part conservation, and how you use your water.
I'll also just add to that one interesting tidbit that I actually learned in discussions recently is that when a CAFO facility is planning an expansion, and Vandergeest does have one planned, when Mark is reviewing that application to expand, water use is actually not a factor that is considered at this time. Just like, you know, you got into like air quality isn't considered, odor, all this stuff. So, you know, someone could say, okay, I want to, you know, expand by a million bajillion, as long as there were enough spreadable acres and they had enough manure storage for it, someone could. So even if they did that in a desert or whatever, so it's not part of the equation, which I think is very interesting, because in this particular scenario that we're all in this site-specific situation, we all know that water quantity or water use has been a big part of our discussion, right? But it's interesting that in this scenario, there really is no interplay between the regulatory agency overseeing the farm and having that able to be a factor of their consideration. It's just not, it's not part of what the state statutes dictate that someone in Mark's position has to factor into that permitting process.
Yeah, that's a good point, Kirsty. So, as I mentioned, it's a water quality-based permitting program, not water quantity. So the water quantity regulation comes in when they apply for the high-capacity well, which Adam talked about.
Any follow-up, Tony? Or? Kurt, go ahead.
Thank you. So when a CAFO permit is issued, it's issued based on the number of animal units, if I'm understanding that correctly. Is that accurate?
So you're saying like the permit dictates the amount of animal units that a farm can have?
The farmer says, okay, I want to have this many animal units based on what I plan the operation to be, and then the permit is reviewed based on that number, but they're not supposed to go over that number of animal units once the permit's issued. Is that correct?
No, I wouldn't say. So the permitting is based on adequate land base and adequate manure storage. So as long as a farm is maintaining those two things, there's no limit in the permit about what they can expand to. They just have to meet those requirements. So like oftentimes, like when a permit is issued, like for Vandergeest, we talked about the current animal units in the permit and then the proposed expansion. So that was part of the reissuance for it. So yeah, that's kind of a common misconception too, is that CAFO permits regulate the number of animals on the farm, which they kind of indirectly do, but not directly.
Indirectly, they do, because the amount of waste that's produced by the number of animals that are permitted is tied to the acreage that is able to be spread on.
Correct. Yes. So they need to have that land base, and a requirement of all CAFO permits is that they have a minimum of 180 days storage capacity for manure and processed wastewater. So if they fall below that, that would be a limiting factor to expansion. But they could have built additional manure storage too to achieve adequate capacity.
Okay, other questions? Oh, Supervisor Lemmer.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just go over who does the monitoring of the air and the traffic and the other three things that you mentioned? And then who monitors the digester itself? So for instance, if this one's going to be an in-ground, if it leaks, how do we know if it's compromised?
So I'll start with the digester. The digester, because it's a reviewable facility and the plans and specs would be reviewed by DNR, that would be under DNR's wheelhouse of monitoring that. So that'd be part of like the compliance inspections that we do. So like I mentioned, like my job is ensuring the compliance and the implementation of the permits. So part of that is we do inspections, do report reviews, complaints, bill response, that sort of thing. But yeah, the digester would be subject to all those inspections, subject to a plan and spec review. As far as knowing whether or not leaks are happening, I would say it'd probably be unlikely that monitoring wells would be installed. They can be installed in CAFOs, and there are several CAFOs that have them in the state, but usually there's a groundwater quality reason for doing so. It's pretty much relying on sound engineering to ensure that there aren't leaks. And the other part of your question, the air, odor, that sort of thing, I don't believe there is really anybody regulating that for CAFOs. I don't think there are regulations or requirements dictating that.
Sometimes an DNR air permit is required depending on how the system is operated. So a lot of the more recent digesters that have been built are operated to generate renewable natural gas. So the gas is cleaned up and injected into the gas pipeline system. And in that process of cleaning up the gas, there's some less desirable gas that doesn't meet spec that is, I don't know if it's flared off, something like that, where it's processed, where there might be some air emissions, and that does go through a DNR air permitting process. So there is, in some cases, an air permit process. Some of the older digesters that use the gas to run basically diesel motors to generate electricity, because of the way those motors were operated, it wasn't flaring off the gas, did not get an air permit. So kind of depends on the operation of the digester.
Thanks, Bernie, for that clarification.
Sure.
Supervisor Draybeck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering, after it goes through the digester, what comes out of there, where does that go? How does that get handled? How does that get put into the fields? Does it have phosphorus in, nitrates in? What is all involved there, if I could?
Yeah, so the nutrient content with digesters doesn't really change much. So the same nitrogen amount, same phosphorus amount will still be there, and it'll be land applied. So one thing with digesters is that a lot of times they'll reuse the solids for bedding. So the bedding, the solids will be separated, they'll come out and they'll be pressed or treated in a manner, and they reuse that for bedding. But as far as like nutrient content, that remains pretty close to the same. It can be in a little bit of different forms, like where it can be more easily uptaken by plants, just I think more of an ammonia state, but it's for the most part the nutrient content is the same, and it'd be handled in the same way that they currently do by land applying it to fields.
Well, does this come off as a liquid then, or solid? Just wondering
Well, we call it liquid manure, but yeah, it'd be. I think with digesters, probably it is more of a liquid type state of the manure. But on large CAFOs, I mean, if you look at the consistency of it, it is more of a liquid than a solid, just with everything going into it and all the inputs. So there are solids in it, but yeah, it's more of a liquid type texture, I would say.
Okay, thank you. Also wondering, when it comes out of the digester, do they put it into their lagoon or pit or whatever? Is that where it goes and waits until the season when they spread it?
Yep, I believe that's how it works. It kind of like flushes through that, it gets treated, and then goes to the manure pits.
Okay, now if that manure pit is like a lined with let's say, soil, is there any chance of that leaking more because the stuff is maybe not got as much stuff in it to keep it from leaking? I'm just asking the question.
I don't know, Bernie, I'll let you weigh in on that one if you think that represents an increased risk.
Yeah, I mean, your typical liquid manure is well under like 10% solids, so it's pretty liquid already. And then what comes out of the digester, we call it digestate, is maybe a little more liquid. And that, as Mark mentioned, often does go through a solid separation system. And those solids can be used as bedding or it can be handled more like a solid manure. It's not anticipated that that would leak more readily in soil in like a in-place earth liner or a clay liner. The NRCS had done some studies on the sealing of earthen storages with manure solids, and doesn't seem to be as big of a factor as maybe was originally thought. So the current standards are a little bit different in that regard, but I don't recall what type of storages Vandergeest has. I mean, if that was a concrete lined manure storage, that wouldn't be a factor, but being more liquid isn't anticipated to be an issue with higher. You're looking at maybe going from 6% to 3% solid. So it's in both cases, it's still pretty low.
And Vandergeest has earthen lined pits, except for their most recent one is a geomembrane liner.
Okay, thank you.
So I had one other question as well. So when it comes to the CAFO permitting process, the way that gets impacted is that it considers the if a CAFO were to build a digester, that's something that becomes a consideration of the regulation by the DNR. Is that what I'm hearing, or?
It becomes incorporated in the permit. So like for Vandergeest instance, their permit was reissued in 2022. It's a 5-year permit term. I don't think I mentioned that. So the permit lasts for 5 years. And in their permit that was reissued in 2022, there's a sample point in there for the potential digester to be built. So it's incorporated in the permit is what we call a sample point, and that's kind of like how we regulate the reviewable structures that'll be spread from into the permit.
Sure. So it's not directly regulated, but tangentially, if you will, it's considered.
It'd be part of
Yeah.
the production area
Sure.
that is regulated under DNR. So it'd be the same, regulated like the same way that a manure storage would be.
Okay. Other questions? Staff, if you had any questions, now would be the time to ask them as well.
It sounded like Bernie might have something he wanted to share before, and I do have a list of questions in front of us too that I can kind of, if you would like, I can help facilitate to make sure we get through a lot of them, but Bernie might have a few tidbits to share as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll do that. Can I share my screen? I don't have as many slides, but I have a couple that might be useful. So I'll do that.
One moment.
Okay. Can you see that yet? Maybe it'll take a while, but. If not, it's not imperative that I share my screen, but.
Yeah. Oh, actually, it just popped up. Okay.
Okay. Nice.
Okay.
So I think you've probably got a sense of this already, but anaerobic, in terms of the KFO program's involvement with digesters. From the engineering side of things, the digester systems are subject to DNR CAFO engineering review. As Mark said, our program focuses on the water quality aspect of it. And so we're looking at things like the digester vessel itself. We kind of view that as another type of waste storage facility, like a big tank. We want to make sure that it's not going to be prone to leaking or having spills, so having adequate freeboard. Usually they're covered, so that's not an issue. Also, we don't want them developing cracks in the walls or the floor and leaking the groundwater. So we take a close look at the construction of those features. We also look at the transfer piping for the liquid manure incoming and digestate going out. There's generally a fairly complicated system of piping involved with that might have like a process building associated with that, with reception tanks, that kind of thing. And we review that like any other type of manure processing building, those are fairly common on these larger livestock operations. Kind of a side note, maybe a lot of you wouldn't understand, but the digester vessel itself isn't really considered active storage volume. It's kind of considered a flow-through system. And the other things that we do review are if there are additives to the manure going into the digester. There is like sulfur in the manure, so sometimes there's hydrogen sulfide gases generated that is not good for the gas generation. And there are methods to reduce that, and there's oftentimes some kind of iron salt additives that are used to reduce that. And we look at the toxicity of those additives, potential toxicity, if there would be any, since that would get mixed into the manure and then land spread. Usually they're pretty low toxic levels, so it's not an issue, but that is another review process that we go through. There's also a DNR review and approval for any kind of additives to the feedstock. In terms of adding like food waste to generate higher energy generation levels. This is not so much an issue anymore because taking on food waste into the digesters generally depreciates the value of the carbon credits that are assigned to the renewable natural gas. So the carbon credits are kind of geared so to dissuade you from adding food waste. So it's just the liquid manure.
I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let you know that your slides are no longer appearing on the screen just because we broadcast live on YouTube. And so it stops recording and kicks us off when you were sharing your screen for some reason. So certainly you can keep talking, but just so you know, no one else can see what you're talking about.
Okay. All right.
In the meantime, if you can multitask, you can feel free to email me your slides.
Yeah.
And we can share it on our end, but just wanted you to know, like, we're with you, but we're also not really with you anymore.
Okay. Let me try again.
So
It worked once. I can try and send that to you, but
sure.
well, there's too many slides. I'd have to direct you where to look, and it isn't that important. I basically have bullet lists here, and I'm kind of walking you through. So I kind of went over what we do review and approve in terms of engineering. Looking at the waste transfer system, the digester vessel. And any kind of additives. We don't really review the digester process itself. Like there are certain operational parameters for temperatures, amount of mixing, flow through time. You can get pretty complicated in terms of the actual digester operation. It doesn't really impact water quality in terms of leakage or spillage. So our authority doesn't really extend to that. And it's in the operator's best interest to stay within that anyway, because of course their best interest is served by operating it correctly and optimizing their gas production. So that's generally left up to them. So yeah, we don't get into that level of detail. And to kind of go back to some of the questions about how these things operate in water usage. So you have, imagine the digester vessel. It's a big tank. I'm not sure what is being proposed at Vandergeest. We haven't received plans yet for that. Generally, there's like 3 types of digesters. Some of the simpler ones are large rectangular concrete tanks that we call plug flow digesters. And then there are circular tanks that have a cover on them. And those are called complete mix digesters. they in general, they work kind of on the same concept though. They have an input and they have outputs. And the input in these is what we call the feedstock. But in most of these newer digesters, the feedstock is the liquid manure being generated at the CAFO. And this liquid manure, generally it comes directly from the barns. It doesn't come from the storage. Okay, so it's kind of a flow through system on its way to storage. So you have the liquid manure going into the tank, and then it's held within those tanks for a certain period of time, days, weeks, while it's generating, the bacteria is doing its thing and generating the methane, and the biogas is siphoned off from the top, and that goes to its own processing system, which the DNR CAFO program doesn't get involved with that part of engineering review. And then there's the digestate, what we call the processed liquid manure. And that digestate is often sent through some kind of processing to separate the more liquid material from the more solid material, so the filtrate. And the liquid part generally goes to one of the existing manure storages at the farm. So that's kind of the process. You had a question?
Oh, Bernie, this is Kirsty again. I just wanted to pause you while you're talking about some of the inner workings, because I know some of our questions that we received via email were kind of diving into, any potential risks or downfalls or monitoring associated with this particular type of digester. And while we also haven't seen any design or specifications for this digester, we do know it will be an in-ground digester. So I know you had one thing that you had just said is spillage or leakage would not affect groundwater quality. So I guess with an in-ground facility, I mean, I know some folks in the room are wondering, what would that mean? And especially if there were not monitoring wells required, what type of inspections could DNR be doing related to that facility? Since I know typically, CAFO 5-year reviews, you guys usually, look at the outside of the facilities. And unless there's something in ground to monitor the water or any leakage, there's no way to know if something in ground is starting to fail, correct?
There are techniques that we do. Well, there's a couple of things. Right after construction, more recently, these digesters are being leak tested. This is not something that the DNR is requiring, but the companies involved with backing them financially, they are leak tested by filling them up with water, and they measure how much the water level might fall within the tanks, and they also will look at the base of the walls to see if there's leakage out of those walls. So I'm not sure again how this digester is constructed. A lot of times the base is exposed, it's not buried. So, and I'm not sure if they're proposing to do this kind of leakage testing at Vandergeest, but that is a method that is sometimes used to test for leakage at the outset, which, there's benefit to that. In terms of ongoing checking to see if there is leakage, there have been, the DNR does have authority to require evaluations of existing reviewable structures. Usually it's based on age, so it's usually quite old. So we do evaluate like old manure storages, that kind of thing. I have heard of in-ground digesters being inspected by emptying them and then visually inspecting them on the inside. So it's usually just relies on a visual inspection without, monitoring wells, that kind of thing.
Do you know how many in-ground digesters there are in Wisconsin, similar to how this one would be designed? It seems like most of them are the above ground. And just also, while your brain is computing that stat, if you can think of it, some folks are also just wondering, do you know how many digesters are up and running in Wisconsin?
Yeah, that's a question that we're getting asked more and more. We don't have a running tally of it. Unfortunately, we do have a database for engineered facilities, but it's kind of antiquated. We don't have a system to really pull that information together. So I don't have a number on that.
Okay. There is a report that the University of Wisconsin put out in 2022 that at that point it said there's 43 digesters in Wisconsin, but I would assume that's at least 50 now.
Yeah, I have
something like that.
This presentation I had up, I developed in 2017.
Okay.
And back then there were 37 digesters in Wisconsin for egg facilities. And they were all on dairy operations based on liquid manure. So certainly more than that. Yeah, probably in the 50 range, I would say. It's probably a good guess on that. And I don't have a breakdown of what is below ground and what's above ground. As I said, I don't really know much about what's being proposed at Vandergeest. Kind of continuing on here.
And just so you know, too, we do have some questions to work through as well, and I think we're going to hit our time window here fairly shortly.
Okay, yeah. Water usage is being brought up a lot. In the digester submittals that we've had and received, none of them has said that there's going to be an increase in water usage just because of the addition of the digester itself. The inputs to the digester is the liquid manure that the farm is already generating. So it isn't considered that there's going to be an increase in water usage. Now, for the operation of the digester. Now, there might be other factors. Sometimes digesters are added as part of a larger expansion. Maybe there's a herd expansion, that sort of thing. These CAFOs with new digesters where they do the leakage testing, there would be, that short-term bump in water usage to fill up the digesters. A lot of the newer digester vessels, we're seeing the tanks hold like 1 to 2 million gallons, and usually there's at least 2 digester vessels. So you might be seeing like filling up 4 million gallons of water to fill up those 2 tanks for leakage testing. Again, I don't know if Vandergeest is proposing to do that. But again, that would be a one-time thing. So from what I know, I don't see much of a water use increase just from the digester itself. And just another point too, in terms of county approval, DNR kind of views these digesters as a manure storage also. And a lot of the counties that these digesters have been put in also have kind of a review and approval authority of the digester vessels under their manure storage ordinance, because it's considered another type of manure storage. So that's kind of what I have. If you have questions, I'll certainly field those.
Yeah, I just wanted to build off your last comment, Bernie, since I know that also addresses a few other questions. And I'll actually let my coworker, Matt Repking, expand a little bit on this because he administers our animal waste ordinance and is normally involved in permitting for animal waste storage structures. But in this particular scenario, the county will not be able to give any insight or oversee that process. And Matt can explain why in this scenario.
So the county ordinance only applies to unincorporated areas of the county unless a resolution is passed to bring it into an incorporated area. Village of Maine is an incorporated area, and they have not passed a resolution to accept the animal waste ordinance in their village. So it does not apply in that area.
Okay. Yeah, and a lot of times, we would work with the counties on review comments, but kind of experience has shown that generally the county follows the DNR lead. Sometimes the county would rely on, say, a DACCAP review engineer or NRCS review engineer for their own approval, depending on whether they got like a contract with DACCAP to do that. But yeah, any other questions on that? I can certainly try and field that.
Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, we do have a lengthy agenda we got to get through, and I'd like to get out of here before Christmas. So, anything else? All right. Well, I'd like to thank the members of the Department of Natural Resources for coming here and providing information today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your schedules to meet with the Environmental Resources Committee today. Thank you. All
Thank you.
right. We will move on to 6, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, or resolution. And speaking of resolution, we will be, I know it looks a little bit out of order that we're doing the information piece under 5A first. We will be discussing this particular topic regarding manure digesters later on the agenda under, where did that get put here? 6C6. I was trying to be courteous to the public to get the rezones out of the way first, and we'll talk about that resolution farther down on the agenda. So that's why the ordering's a little bit, looks out of order, but that was the theory behind this. So let's jump into 6A. 1, public hearings, review possible actions and possible recommendations to the county board for its consideration. We have A1 through 5. Just to note, item 6A4 was pulled from the agenda. So for this afternoon, we'll do items 1, 2, 3, and 5. Let's open the public hearing then. To start, I just ask that everybody mute your phones and other electronic devices, and if joining us online, please mute yourself if you are not speaking. The Marathon County ERC is now meeting in public hearing the location plan specifications and purpose of the following projects. We have 6A. 1, Tim Vreeland on behalf of Paul and Carrie Simonis, General Agriculture to Rural Residential, Town of Gunther. 2, Tim Vreeland on behalf of Mitch Gums from General Agriculture and Farmland Preservation to Rural Residential, Farmland Preservation to General Agriculture, and General Agriculture to Rural Residential, Town of Hull. 6A3, Tim Vreeland on behalf of Gladys Martin, Farmland Preservation to Rural Residential, Town of Brighton. And 6A5, we have Keith Baxter on behalf of Clara Miller, General Agriculture to Rural Residential, Town of Green Valley. Members of the committee present, myself, Supervisor Longenhan, Supervisor Drabeck, Supervisor Unger, Supervisor Vensky, Supervisor Shafinsky, Supervisor Seefeld, and Marilyn Benn, our Wisconsin Towns and Villages Association representative. Also present are staff as needed for the purposes of conducting the hearing. The establishment of the ERC is required by law for purposes of administration of county ordinances and land conservation programs. The committee must follow state laws and local ordinances as written. The committee cannot change or ignore any part of the ordinances or state laws, so must apply the laws as written. The purpose of the committee is to hear and decide on proposed ordinances and ordinance revisions, rezoning petitions, and provide direction on land conservation and planning programs. The ERC will give a full and fair hearing to any person applying for a rezone petition. A taped recording is being made of the meeting, which will assist with preparation of written hearing minutes. The committee is interested in hearing all pertinent comments and questions. Each hearing will be opened by reading the public notice and allowing staff to present a staff report, including evidence from any on-site inspection. The applicant, anyone wishing to testify, will be sworn in and allowed to give testimony. Witnesses will be called in the order of those first in favor, second opposed, and then third as interested may appear. The committee may ask questions of the zoning staff and applicant. It is necessary that we set a reasonable time limit on individual statements on the overall length of the hearing. To promote orderly discussion, anyone wishing to present oral testimony or ask questions relating to the hearing should state your name and present your testimony or question so it becomes part of the official record. We request you avoid repetition. Once the committee has all the necessary facts, chairman will close the hearing, allowing no further testimony, and the committee will deliberate and decide for the public whether the applicant has met the standards in the ordinance. No additional testimony from the public is allowed during the deliberation. However, the committee may question staff for purposes of clarification. After a decision is made, the committee will proceed to the next hearing. Many of the decisions made by the committee are a recommendation to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, who will take up the matter at a future county board meeting. Please contact staff for more information regarding this county board process. So the committee will now hear the application of item 6A1 on the agenda. We have Tim Verlin on behalf of Paul and Carrie Simonis, General Agriculture to Rural Residential, Town of Gunther. We'll start with Garrett with the staff report. Garrett, we'll swear you in here. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Proceed with the staff report, please.
All right, this is for Paul and Carrie Simonis, petition to rezone land, staff report December 5th, 2023 for the Environmental Resources Committee. The petitioner is Tim Vreeland at 6103 Dawn Street, Weston, Wisconsin, 54476. Property owners are Paul and Carrie Simonis at 158308 Sandy Creek Road in Mosinee, Wisconsin, 54455. Area proposed to be rezoned is located on Sandy Creek, just east of the intersection of Harvest Moon Road and Sandy Creek Road. The petition of Tim Vreeland on behalf of Paul and Carrie Simonis to amend the General Code of Ordinance for Marathon County, Chapter 17 Zoning Code to rezone lands from GA General Agriculture to RR Rural Residential, described as part of Lot 3 of CSM 10167-41-190, located in the southwest quarter of the southeast quarter of Section 29, Township 26 North, Range 8 East, Town of Gunther. Parent parcel is listed. Town of Gunther Town Board met on October 9th, 2023. Environmental Resources Committee is meeting today, December 5th, 2023 at 3 p.m. A legal advertisement was published in the Wausau Daily Herald. Notice of the zoning change request was also sent by regular mail to adjacent property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. On October 9th, 2023, the Town of Gunther Town Board recommended approval to Marathon County's Environmental Resources Committee. The rezone meets all the zoning district standards as it relates to size, frontage, access, and dimension. The rezone also appears to be consistent with the purpose and intent of the town's comprehensive plan and as indicated by the town resolution. Based on the information provided above, findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the town's recommendation, it appears the rezone request meets all the rezone criteria and standards for rezoning. Therefore, CPZ staff recommend that the Environmental Resources Committee recommend approval to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors. Should the rezone be approved by Marathon County Board of Supervisors, CPZ staff recommend that the town update its comprehensive plan to reflect the zoning change if applicable.
Questions for Garrett? All right, thanks, Garrett. We'll move on to public testimony. First, I'll call those in favor of the proposed rezone. So I'm going to call,
We do have Carrie Simonis online if there's questions for her.
okay. So I guess I'll call those in favor, and I'm going to call twice for each one of these, with the second one being a final call. So I'll call anybody wishing to speak in favor of the proposed rezone. Please identify yourself at this time. Last call. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the proposed rezone, please identify yourself at this time. Moving on. Anybody wishing to speak against the proposed rezone, please identify yourself at this time. Last call. Anybody wishing to speak against the proposed rezone, please identify yourself at this time. Third, anybody wishing to speak as interested, please identify yourself at this time. Last call. Anybody wishing to speak as interested for item 6A1, please identify yourself at this time. All right. Seeing as no one else wishes to testify for this application, I'm now declaring the public hearing for item 6A1 now closed. The committee will now deliberate on the application and apply the standards of the zoning ordinance. I think a motion to approve would be in order here. Supervisor Ritter.
I will make a motion to approve the petition of
Tim Vreeland on behalf of Paul and Carrie Simonis to amend the General Code of Ordinance for Marathon County Chapter 17 zoning code to rezone lands from general agriculture to rural residential in the town of Gunther due to town and staff recommendation.
Motion is made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Sherfinsky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to 6A2.
All right, this is from Mitchell Gums and Jeremy Brown, petition to rezone land, staff report December 5th, 2023 for the Environmental Resources Committee. The petitioner is Tim Vreeland at 6103 Dawn Street, Weston, Wisconsin, 54476. Property owners are Mitchell Gums at 224951 Deal Creek Lane, Colby, Wisconsin, 54421, and Jeremy Brown, 223501 County Road F, Colby, Wisconsin. Area to be rezoned is located on County Road F and County Road N near the intersection of County Road N and County Road F. The petition of Tim Vreeland on behalf of Mitchell Gums and Jeremy Brown to amend the General Code of Ordinance for Marathon County Chapter 17 zoning code to rezone lands from GA General Agriculture and FP Farmland Preservation to RR Rural Residential, FP Farmland Preservation to GA General Agriculture, and GA General Agriculture to RR Rural Residential, is located in part of the southeast quarter of the northwest quarter, the southwest quarter of the northwest quarter, the southeast quarter of the northeast quarter, and the southwest quarter of the northeast quarter, all in Section 24, Township 28 North, Range 2 East, Town of Hall. Area proposed to be rezoned from GA General Agriculture and FP Farmland Preservation to RR Rural Residential is described as Lot 1. Areas to be rezoned from FP Farmland Preservation to GA General Agriculture are described as Lot 2, Lot 3, Lot 4, and Lot 7. An area proposed from GA to be rezoned from GA Agriculture to RR Rural Residential is described as Outlot 1 of the preliminary CSM parent parcels as listed. Public hearing, the Town of Hall did meet on November 13th, 2023, and Marathon County Environmental Resources Committee is meeting December 5th, 2023 at 3 p.m. A legal advertisement was published in the Wausau Daily Herald. Notice of the zoning change request was also sent by regular mail to adjacent property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. So it's not listed here in the staff report, but I do have the resolution. And on November 13th, the Town of Hall Town Board did recommend approval to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors, or to the Marathon County Environmental Resources Committee. The rezone meets all the zoning district standards as it relates to size, frontage, access, and dimension. The rezone also appears to be consistent with the purpose and intent of the town's comprehensive plan and as indicated by the town resolution. Based on the information provided above, findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the town's recommendation, it appears the rezone request meets all the rezone criteria and standards for rezoning. Therefore, CPZ staff recommend that the Environmental Resources Committee recommend approval to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors. Should the rezone be approved by Marathon County Board of Supervisors, CPZ staff recommend that the town update its comprehensive plan to reflect the zoning change if applicable. And we do have Tim Vreeland, the supervisor here, and I believe Mitch Gums, or the surveyor, excuse me, and Mitch Gums, the property owner, is also here.
Sure, and maybe if you can't answer this question, Garrett, maybe they can, but if you can answer it, I'm just going to ask it. What was the need for the rezones in front of us here?
So whenever you perform a rezone where you're doing a boundary change and you're separating land, you have to meet the size standard for the lot. And a lot of these areas that were originally 35 acres that were, or they were non-conforming lots that were farm preservation at one time, when you do the geometry change, they have to be brought up to the current ordinance. So they don't meet the lot standard size anymore to be in farm preservation. So they're moving around to be general agriculture, some. And then the ones here that are being, going from that GA or the farm pres to rural residential, it's cleaning up some lot lines and then a little bit of split zoning as they go ahead and redo the property lines.
Okay.
And if any like property specifics and things like that, I believe Mitch can answer those if needed.
Sure. When we get to the public testimony, we could swear them in. So, okay. Any questions for staff right now? Okay. Thank you, Garrett.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if Tim or Mitch would like to provide testimony, all you'd have to do is just come up to that mic. I'll swear you in. It takes 2 seconds. So, can Tim, if you want to state your name and address for the record.
Tim Vreeland, 7070 Coney Road Q, Wittenberg.
Okay, Tim, do you sort of tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
I think you explained it quite well. It is adjusting several property lines. There's sheds across property lines. The guy's driveway wasn't on. So once you start, like you said, adjusting some of those lines, even though the property was not 35 acres, once we move it, now they're just less than, it was actually one's like 17 acres. We have to make that adjustment for the rezone. So I'm sure Mitch wouldn't have cared if you left it at Farm Pres, but we got to comply with the county's rules and regulations, and that's why we're here, so.
Okay. All right, I've got no other questions. Does the committee have any questions? Okay, thank you, Tim. All right, I'll call one final time for this one. Does anybody else wish to speak in favor of proposed rezone 6A2? All right, seeing none. Anybody wishing to speak opposed to 6A2, please identify yourself this time. Last call, anybody wishing to speak opposed to proposed rezone, please identify yourself this time. Anybody wishing to speak as interested for item 6A2, please identify yourself this time. Last call, anybody wishing to speak as interested for item 6A2, please identify yourself at this time. Seeing as no one else wishes to testify for this application, I'm now declaring item 6A2, Tim Vreeland on behalf of Mitch Gumbs from General Agriculture and Farmland Preservation to Rural Residential and Farmland Preservation to General Agriculture and General Agriculture to Rural Residential. Town of Hall now closed. The committee will now deliberate on the application, apply the standards of the zoning ordinance. I think a motion to approve here would be in order as well.
Long read.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can.
Supervisor Unger.
Okay. I'll make a motion. Oh, thank you. Make a motion on the petition of Tim Vreeland on behalf of Mitchell Gooms and Jeremy Brown to amend the General Code of Ordinance for Marathon County, Chapter 17 zoning code to rezone lands. Can I rezone and add? Hang on. Instead
Sure.
of reading it all, just combine it?
Well,
You
you,
need to have it all.
you
read.
can move to approve even what's listed on the agenda. The idea is that you approve the rezone, and then we just ask that some reasoning be provided. Others note
Okay.
the information that's presented as the staff report. So if you
Okay.
want to look to the staff report itself, or you can take a look at what's on item 6A2 on the agenda as well. So,
Okay. So condensing the, to rezone lands from general agriculture to farmland preservation to rural residential, farmland preservation to general agricultural, and general agricultural to rural residential in the town of Hull. Areas to rezone from general agriculture to farmland preservation, rural residential as described in Lot 1. The areas to be zoned from farmland preservation, general agriculture to described as in Lot 2, 3, 4, and 7. And areas to be zoned for general agriculture to rural residential as the outlots of 1 of the preliminary CSM. So through the facts and findings and conclusions of law,
sure.
make a motion to approve it.
Okay. Yeah, just the.
It was just a lot.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, can we condense? But-
The first part, just to confirm, general agriculture and farm preservation to rural residential, correct? That's, yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, motion is made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Verbensky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, we appreciate it. All right, moving on to item 6A3, Tim Vreeland on behalf of Gladys Martin, Farmland Preservation to Rural Residential, Town of Brighton.
All right, this is for Gladys Martin, petition to rezone land, staff report December 5th, 2023 for the Environmental Resources Committee. Petitioners Tim Vreeland at 6103 Dawn Street, Weston, Wisconsin. Property owners Gladys Martin, located at 217158 Abe Lincoln Ave, Stratford, Wisconsin 54484. Area proposed to be rezoned is located on Abe Lincoln Ave, just north of the intersection of Abe Lincoln Ave and Kington Road. The petition of Tim Vreeland on behalf of Gladys Martin to amend the General Code of Ordinance for Marathon County Chapter 17 zoning code to rezone land from FP Farmland Preservation to RR Rural Residential, located in part of the northeast quarter of the southeast quarter of Section 12, Township 27 North, Range 2 East, Town of Brighton. The area being rezoned from FP Farmland Preservation to RR Rural Residential is described as Lot 1 of the preliminary CSM. Parent parcel is listed. The Town of Brighton Town Board met on November 14th, 2023. Marathon County Environmental Resources Committee is meeting today, December 5th, 2023 at 3 p.m. A legal advertisement was published in the Wausau Daily Herald. Notice of the zoning change request was also sent by regular mail to adjacent property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. On November 14, 2023, the Town of Brighton Town Board recommended approval of Marathon County's Environmental Resources Committee. The rezone meets all the zoning district standards as it relates to size, frontage, access, and dimension. The rezone also appears to be consistent with the purpose and intent of the town's comprehensive plan and as indicated by a town resolution. Based on the information provided above, findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the town's recommendation, it appears the rezone request meets all the rezone criteria and standards for rezoning. Therefore, CPZ staff recommend that the Environmental Resources Committee recommend approval to the Marathon County Board of Supervisors. Should the rezone be approved by Marathon County Board of Supervisors, CPZ staff recommend that the town update its comprehensive plan to reflect the zoning change if applicable.
So it's on page, I think, 62 in the packet. That future land use map from 2006, the way that currently looks is that it's single-family residential, and then if this is approved, it would get updated to reflect cropland, or what do you think?
No, it's just a standard statement that if it's applicable, in this case, it would not be, because according to their future land use map, that area is designated as single-family residential already.
Oh,
so there
got
would
it.
not
Yep.
be a need for a change.
Got it. That makes sense. Okay. Any other questions? All right, seeing none. We'll move on. All right, anybody wishing to speak in favor of the proposed rezone for item 6A3, please identify yourself this time. I'll call again. Last call. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of the proposed rezone 6A3, please identify yourself at this time. Seeing none. Anybody wishing to speak opposed to item 6A3, please identify yourself at this time. Last call. Anybody wishing to speak opposed to item 6A3, please identify yourself at this time. Anybody wishing to speak as interested for item 6A3, please identify yourself at this time. Last call. Anybody wishing to speak as interested for item 6A3, please identify yourself at this time. If no one else wishes to testify for this application, I'm now declaring the public hearing on Tim Vreeland on behalf of Gladys Martin, Farmland Preservation, Rural Residential Town of Brighton, now closed. Committee will now deliberate on the application and apply standards of the zoning ordinance. Motion to approve again, I think, would be in order here. Supervisor Drabek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to approve the rezone of Gladys Martin from farmland preservation to rural residential based on the staff report and the findings of fact.
Motion is made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Ritter. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Lastly, 6A5, back to Garrett.
All right, this is for Keith Baxter, petition to rezone land, staff report, December 5th, 2023, for the Environmental Resources Committee. The petitioner is Keith Baxter at 206-686 County Road S, Moseley, Wisconsin, 54455. Property owner is Clara Miller, 141560 Moon Road, Moseley, Wisconsin, 54455. The area proposed to be rezoned is located on County Road S at the corner of County Road S and County Road C. The petition of Keith Baxter on behalf of Claire Miller to amend the General Code of Ordinance for Marathon County Chapter 17 Zoning Code to rezone lands from GA General Agriculture to RR Rural Residential, located in part of the southeast quarter of the southwest quarter of Section 10, Township 26 North, Range 5 East, Town of Green Valley. The area proposed to be rezoned to RR Rural Residential is described as Lot 1 of the preliminary CSM. Parent parcel is listed. The Town of Green Valley Town Board did meet. Unfortunately, the resolution that they sent back, they only sent back the second page instead of also the first page that gives the date that they met. So I'm not 100% sure when they met, but they did meet. So Marathon County Environmental Resource Committee is meeting today, December 5th, 2023 at 3 p.m. A legal advertisement was published in the Wausau Daily Herald. Notice of the zoning change request was also sent by regular mail to adjacent property owners within 300 feet of the subject property. So again, the Town of Green Valley did meet. Their resolution, the second page is where they state whether they're going to approve, deny, or request an extension. They did request an extension. Their question was, how do they plan on accessing the farmlands? We have been in contact with the property owner, and that he's working with the town to figure out when they're going to meet to discuss that question. If they're discussing it in an emergency meeting or anything like that, but that hasn't happened quite yet. So at this time, because we don't have a resolution, staff is going to refrain from giving a recommendation on this one.
Okay. That was going to be my follow-up question, which is that if we didn't have that particular piece of information, should we continue forward? But if the property owner doesn't have any problem, and it sounds like they don't because they're working with the town already, we can just wait for more information from them.
Right.
So,
On a general note, as far as zoning addressing their question, we don't, I guess, as a zoning department, we're not worried about actual direct driveway type access. Ours is road frontage alone, and the lot that's remaining, the remnant, does have significant amount of road frontage for that zoning district,
okay.
for what's being left.
Sure. All right. Well, does anybody have any questions right now? Otherwise, I'm just going to close this hearing. We'll reopen it when we have more information. Okay. All right. So I'm going to close the hearing for 6A5 and, no, I'm just going to close it. Yeah, there wouldn't be a motion required. So, okay. So 6A5, we're going to close that for now, and we'll wait for more information from the town. So thank you, staff. We'll move on to 6B, review and possible recommendations to county board for its consideration. Town zoning changes pursuant to Wisconsin statute 60.62 sub 3. We have B1, Town of Texas Town Zoning Ordinance Update. Chad, what do you got?
Yeah, so this is just a rezone from a non-county zone town. They have listed parcels that they're looking at rezoning from residential to agriculture. And on the screen up there, there's the list of the parcels. All of them are going from a residential district to an agricultural district. And essentially, it needs to come through this committee to get the final approval. It goes to county board afterwards, after this committee. They've provided everything that they need to provide us, so.
Okay. All right. Well, given that they provide everything they need to provide, a motion to approve would be in order here. Supervisor Stravinsky?
Thank you, Chair. I would make a motion to approve the Town of Texas Town Zoning Ordinance Updates per staff approval.
Sure. Motion is made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Drabek. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Moving on to B2. Town of Ringgold, Town Zoning Ordinance Update on Kennels.
So I don't have much on this one either. It's just the town of Ringgold is updating their kennels ordinance in their code. And again, they've provided everything that they need to for us. It just needs to go through the committees for approval.
Okay. They provided the legal notice and then, okay. Sorry, I was looking for something specific. Okay, never mind. Okay, motion to approve here would be in order as well. Motion by, Supervisor Ritter.
I will make a motion to approve the Town of Ringgold's zoning changes pertaining to kennels.
Motion has been made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Stravinsky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. All right. Thank you, folks. That got quite a bit off the agenda. We'll move on to 6C, review and possible recommendations of the county board for its consideration. 1, approval of annual county forest work plan, and Tom's been waiting patiently in the back. So go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Chair Langenhahn. So this is an annual work plan that needs to be considered by the ERC committee and county board for certain grant funding through DNR. The Forestry Recreation Committee looked at this afternoon and offered a motion to forward on to the ERC committee unanimously. It's just a body work that we do in the Forestry Division through 2024. The resolution outlines the work and the attachment with the work plan, county forest work plan with the wildlife work plan following is attached as an appendix. And I'll just stop there and ask for any questions unless you want me to go through the plan.
You don't have to do a word by word, Tom, but is there anything substantially that's changed compared to last year?
So a couple of things. We haven't planted any red pine seedlings in the past 16 or 17 years. We did clear an area out a couple of years ago. So we're going to be planting 60 acres at 9 Mile Forest units with containerized red pine to reforest it. There's another item later in the plan about the bat habitat conservation plan, which I'll explain a little bit later under that agenda item. But really, the work plan is very similar to other previous year work plans with timber management and wildlife management, soil and water conservation being part of that.
Okay, any questions from the committee? All right, where does this go upon approval, Tom? Does this go through the board?
Yeah, need approval by this committee to forward on the county board for their consideration and next week.
Okay, all right. Anybody like to make that motion? Supervisor Drabek?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to make a motion to approve the county forest work plan.
Motion's made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Vensky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. All right. C2, application for county forest acreage share loan payment. Tom?
Thank you. So this is the resolution that in previous years the county board has passed in relation to the forested acreage on the county forests. We're eligible for 50 cents for each acre, and we pay that back when timber is harvested at 20 cents on the dollar. And we pay back more than the loan each year, but we've typically used this money as a capital budget to use for purchasing equipment and the possibility of when there's a land acquisition, using this money to match the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Fund. We need to have a 50% match on that. So it's $15,000. It's not a whole lot, but as we build this up, it does build up in a non-lapsing account to be used for again, forest maintenance, development, land acquisition. Can be really used for anything operationally or capital wise within the county forest.
We pay it back in full at the end of every year, you said, off of whatever we get off of timber, right?
Typically, the loan gets paid off, the $15,000 gets paid off first, and then we have a balance in that loan account that gets paid off every year.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's interest, and it's an interest-free loan from the DNR, so as long as we cut one tree and pay off 20 cents every year, they don't come asking for any more money.
All right. Okay. This also would go to the county board, right?
That is correct.
Okay. Any questions? Seeing no, anybody like to make a motion? Supervisor Vensky?
I will make a motion for the application for the county forest acreage share loan payment.
Motion's made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Ritter. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. And item C3, county fish and game projects. Tom, is that you again?
That is me again.
Okay.
So this is a resolution that is basically just replaces a previous resolution in 2015. It allows the county to apply for a 50% match grant for county fish and game projects within Marathon County. It's not a lot of money either. It's $4,314 every year. Matched with $4,314 of county dollars, which lets us do certain projects within the county forest, county parks, private lands, public lands, anything in the county that benefits fish and game projects. For example, we've replaced boat landings at a lot of our parks in the past with it. We've partnered with Trout Unlimited to do trout projects. We've done some wildlife projects on county and state lands, and the last two projects was upgrading the archery range at the Dwayne Corbin Shooting Range Park. And then before that, we replaced all the benches at the shooting range with this money. Again, it's a 50-50 match grant, and it just replaces the resolution for DNR because they need an updated resolution. The projects get approved through the Forestry Committee in on or before October 1st of each year.
Do we get this grant every year?
Every year we've applied and received this grant.
Okay. Suraj Shafrinsky. Oh, no? Okay.
Not a question.
Okay. Oh, you had a question or no question? No question? Okay. Okay, anyway, sorry. Getting jittery. Any questions from the committee? All right, seeing and hearing none, motion would be in order. Suraj Shafrinsky?
I was just jumping ahead.
Okay, fair enough.
Yes, I would like to make a motion that we approve the County Fish and Game Projects matching grant fund.
Okay, motion is made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Vensky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. All right, Tom, you got a lot here. C4, amending the Marathon County Forest Comprehensive Land Use Plan. What you got?
All right, so the county passed the 21 through 2035 County Forest Comprehensive Land Use Plan back in late 2020. And every once in a while, we need to go back and look at the plan and do some amendments. These amendments are really pretty basic amendments, adding some information and taking some information out, just basically correcting some things. There's 9 chapters that are being looked at, and 7 of those chapters have amendments. And I went through them with the Forestry Committee today, and they unanimously passed a motion to forward them on to the ERC, and we're hoping that they accept it today and forward it on to the county board. I can answer questions. I think they were distributed to you, and I can answer questions on those, or I can take 20 minutes to go through them, and I bet we want to just answer questions.
Well, what I have seen when just skimming through this, looks like you've added dates, you've added some cost information, so doesn't look like anything substantial to me. Is that fair to say?
They're really basic changes. There's really nothing that is controversial at all in here. From my standpoint, it's just dates or some things that DNR has changed through legislation that we have to accept regardless. So they're just basically put in the plan so that it can match those changes over the last 3 years.
What does the plan get used for then? Is it just is it a guidance document for us or the DNR, or like what is it primarily used for?
So it is a policy document that is required by state statute every 15 years, and so there's a template that DNR and County Forest Association work on, and then the counties build off of that and specialize it for each of the counties, kind of individualize it for each county. So we did that in 2019, and I think I started in 18 and finished it in early 2020 to get to be able to get it in line for the 2021 season. But it is a policy document. I refer to it very frequently. It does have blocking boundaries. It has a lot of information in it, and it is on the website in case you'd like to review it. But we use it quite a bit, and it is our policy document.
Okay. All right. Questions for Tom? Including adding words like spongy.
Yes. So that was DNR changing the word from what you see there to a word that's a little easier for folks to listen to.
Yeah, and you added the information on fat bike tire, bike trails. Yeah, I figured out why the packet was so long. All right.
Oh, fat tire people couldn't go on there until it's, no, I'm just kidding.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah, okay.
So just a heads up too, so if these changes are approved today for the ERC committee, I need to include the entire chapter for the county board. So it'll be your packet will be a little bit longer for county board with the included changes.
All right. All right. Well, that's good we don't have paper packets anymore. Otherwise, I can't imagine what the postage would be on this. So, Supervisor Bensky.
We'll make a motion to change the amending in the Marathon County Forest Comprehensive Land Use Plan.
Motion's been made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Unger. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Now, for C6, we might have a little bit more discussion than what we've had for the past couple topics here. Tom, are you around for D2? Oh, yeah.
Five?
Did I miss 5?
I think you missed 5.
No, 5 was pulled. I'm sorry. That's on, 5 was pulled. Sorry, that's on my sheet. I apologize. I should have announced that. So yeah, C5 is pulled, just to be clear. So for 6, that one's going to be probably a little bit longer discussion. So Tom, are you here for D2?
Correct.
Okay, is that the only other thing you have? You want to do D2?
That'd be great.
Okay, why don't you do that, and then you can get out of here, okay?
Okay, so I need to get my notes here first. Okay, so the Lake States Forest Management Bat Habitat Plan is.
Oh, actually, 1 second. Assuming there's no objection to taking this one out of order. Okay, seeing no objection, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. We're asking to enter an agreement with the DNR and the Lake States Forest Management Bat Habitat Conservation Plan. So the long and the short of this is the bats, because of the white nose syndrome, were listed as primarily threatened for a few years, and they listed them endangered on March 31st. And WCFA, the County Forest Association, has been working with DNR on how to continue to manage and harvest our forests and parks. There's a summary attached providing the information on the on why the bat was listed, and basically, in a nutshell, if we were to, we need to be in compliance with the Endangered Species Act, and this signing on to this plan with DNR will allow us to continue normally harvesting our timber in our parks and forests. There are maps included in with the plan that includes all of our forested areas within our county forests and parks, and we have to agree to follow the conservation measures as outlined in the conservation plan summary, which you can read through them, but those are very easily met in Marathon County. And there's a little bit of reporting every year to DNR on number of acres of timber harvest broken out by different timber type. And so what we're proposing today is, again, the Forestry Committee looked at this last month, or I guess at the end of October, and they thought it would be a good idea to enter into this agreement with the DNR so we can continue to harvest timber and also look after the bat in doing some conservation measures. So, for example, we don't know if there's bats underneath tree crevices when there's a tree cut. So if we actually harvest a tree, we meaning the contractors out there harvest a tree and have incidentally taken a bat, killed a bat, we're okay. We're not okay because we don't want to do that, but we're okay through signing this agreement. We won't be in violation of the Endangered Species Act. So we're asking that ERC approve signing on to this agreement and having the director of the Parks and Forestry Department sign this and send it back in so that we can maintain not getting in trouble with the Endangered Species Act.
Okay. Any questions for Tom? All right, so a motion to approve here, Tom, would allow you, Director Polly to do so?
That's correct.
Okay. Anybody like to make that motion? Supervisor Ritter?
I will make the motion to approve the DNR, the Lakes Forest Management Bat Habitat Conservation Plan.
Approve the agreement.
Approve the agreement.
Okay, thank you. Motion is made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Vensky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. All right, Tom, I'm not kicking you out, by the way. I just figured that you might appreciate that. Okay. Sure. All right. Wow. Yeah, we won't have a quorum. All right. Okay, we'll move on to, let's go back to C6. So consideration of initial resolutions for proposed digester projects. So I guess I would start by maybe getting just a little bit of direction from staff as far as the resolution itself and what the ask of the resolution is. I don't know if that's possible or if anybody has that information in front of them.
Well, I'm going to look at Chair Gibbs too, but maybe we need to get Lance back in here. But we were asked to put this back on the agenda because I believe the original request that came from HR Finance was for this committee to come back to HR Finance and perhaps the county board with any considerations that they should be looking into if the county is going to enter into this bond. And that's a really quick summary. Chair Gibbs, do you want to add something to that?
No, again, the other thing that I would just reiterate is that this is the initial resolution, and it allows us to enter into discussions with the company. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're still approving the project or going to bond for it. It only is the allowance to start for them to reserve some of the dollars in the state allocation for tax exempt bonding, and allows them to, at least allows the county to start that initial discussion as to, what fees do we want, what, if any, and what other things we would want in the project.
If the administrator has anything to add?
Sure. I thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize if I restate anything Chair Gibbs just referenced. But in terms of context, this is my sense of the battery of decisions or battery of choices before the board. And I preface this by saying I am certainly not an expert in conduit bonding or the financing of these projects. But as was laid out by Attorney Templin, under Wisconsin statutes, you do have the opportunity to serve as the conduit issuer, as Chair Gibbs referenced. The first step in that process is that initial resolution for consideration by the board that serves as that stake in the ground, I think is the terminology that was used by the presenters before the board to allow them to recapture any expenditure of funds following that stake in the ground, that initial resolution. It does not obligate the county to ultimately serve as the conduit issuer. So that's choice one. The second option, as I see it with respect to this project, would be for the county to, as Attorney Templin referenced, express support for the entity to receive financing through PFA or the Public Finance Authority. That, as Attorney Templin referenced, is somewhat similar in that it is a tax-exempt financing option provided for by statute. However, Public Finance Authority takes care of kind of the logistics in terms of the issuance of those bonds. They also have an initial issuance fee and an annual fee that accompanies that activity. I sent to the full board an email kind of outlining those charges, as I understand it, that the Public Finance Authority has in connection with its work as an issuer. And then the third option, as is always the county's prerogative, should it be the prerogative, you can take no action. that is neither oppose the project in terms of financing, but simply express that the county's not going to serve as the conduit issuer, not going to provide the assent for the company to go through PFA and allow the company to attempt to procure its own financing. So I don't know that that's the exclusive list, but that in my mind are kind of the three options available to the county. From the staff perspective, we're here to try to bring you as much information as we can to help you make that policy decision. I recognize that one of the things that was asked of me, I believe at HR Finance, reach out and see if any of our peer counties or counties in our area have served as conduit issuers for industrial revenue bonds under Wisconsin statutes in the past. I've done that. I have not heard back from anyone that has done that. However, I learned today that it's my belief that Langlade County recently did approve a very similar project from, I believe, the same entity that is working to support the second conduit bonding request that you haven't seen before you, but I referenced it in your meeting. That entity has a project that was recently approved for conduit issue in Langlade County. I learned that, I believe, yesterday, so I'm going to follow up and see what additional information I have. My sense in terms of kind of advantages and disadvantages, and we can have more conversation around these topics, and we'll be happy to get you additional information. My sense is that if you serve as the conduit issuer, that is a tangible benefit to the entity, which may afford you then the opportunity, if you did have requests of that entity relative to the specifics of the project, that they would perhaps be more amenable to having that conversation, because again, they get something of value in return, and that is the financing. You don't have that carrot, for lack of a better term, if the company is going to go get their own private financing. But all those things said, happy, Mr. Chair, to try to answer any questions and bring you additional information as you need.
Sure, I guess I would just add a couple of things, which is there are no resolution, with the three options, well, realistically two that would require resolutions, there are none in front of us today. It's just the initial discussion regarding those resolutions, or?
Correct. I don't believe there's anything in the packet, but there was in the packet, I believe, at the full board meeting, the initial resolution, a draft initial resolution, was one of the documents that the entity had provided. I do know that they have it in their battery of documents for ultimate consideration. So I can try to find that here quickly.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess to kick off some of the discussion here, and I want to caution the rest of the committee from going into the body of work that might be HR finances and education, economic development. You know, I think our task here is to look at the environmental matters. You know, if any of us is concerned about the financial piece, I'm sure HR finance and to a certain extent maybe even EEDC will have more information on that in the future, in which case you can attend those meetings. But I really want to frame the discussion this afternoon looking purely at the environmental impacts. Not that the financial stuff isn't important, I just want to look at what our body of work is. So with that being said, the part that I struggled with listening to the DNR this afternoon, and I appreciate the information that they provided, but it's really tough to try and be for a position, whether it be the public financing piece, the conduit bonding. It's really hard to get into that supportive role when we don't know what the project is going to be. Because when the DNR was talking this afternoon, they kept saying that we won't know what the water demands are going to be until they actually submit them to them. I'm guessing as part of the CAFO permitting process, right? Their designation. So the part I'm struggling with is if we want to do something like this, and we're not approving the project, but you know, it would essentially be encouraging the project itself. It's a little I'm a little apprehensive just because we don't know what the project itself is going to be as far as the demands on water. That's where I'm at right now. If they said that, oh, it's going to have a negligible effect, it's going to have no effect at all, they can guarantee that, I'd actually be very supportive of this. It's just that I don't have that information in front of me right now. I don't know if that's something we can even get from that business group yet. I don't know. So that's where I'm at. But Supervisor Shafinsky.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm going to echo your comments and even build on them. In that, from what if I understood the DNR positions and presentation correctly, the volume of water is not even a consideration as part of their permitting process. All they're concerned about is water quality. So whether it's 1 million or 5 million or 50 million gallons a year, that doesn't even enter into their consideration process. And given the situation that we have in the western parts of the county, I think that would be the part that really has the potential for some wide-ranging environmental impacts. So yeah, we're being asked to have a thought process and weigh in yes or no on something when we really have no data on what this is going to be. I suppose one thing that we could do perhaps would be to go back and ask those questions, whether the DNR asks them or not. We can ask them as part of our evaluation of do we want to be part of the conduit bonding process.
Sure. I think given what the DNR said was that they do take into consideration the consumption of the water, because if they change that CAFO permit piece, I'm just going to use Vandergeest as an example. Vandergeest has got to go to them and they got to say, hey, we're going to put up this new structure. DNR notices it. They change the CAFO plan and that triggers their review process. So I think I use the word tangentially. Maybe that's not the best word, but I think they do sort of regulate. It's just not directly regulating the creation of those structures. I would be very supportive of reaching out to the company and just asking, like, do you have a site plan? Do you have a plan as far as what your water usage is going to be? If they can present something to us or communicate something back that we're not planning on consuming any more water than we already are, I would probably be supportive of the conduit bonding, especially because even if we don't support it, they're probably going to do it anyway. My fear is the signaling, that if we do this and we encourage this, that we put that water consumption at a higher level. That's what I'm a little afraid of. So, Chair Gibbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there's two things that we need to look at. First off, the DNR does issue their permits on their high-capacity wells. They do monitor the amount of usage that they have, and they have for the last 10 years, I think. And they've expressed that they have to stay under that usage amount. Now, that being said, we did hear initially when the engineer from the project did present that the amount of increase in water usage would be negligible. Now, that was their statement, but I don't know that there was any quantification of that.
Sure, and I don't mean to interrupt, but that was at the county board presentation. Is that what they said?
Correct. Yes. They did.
Okay.
They did say that.
Okay. Marilyn?
My concern is if you do one, somebody else wants to put in a digester. Are you going to do the same thing for them? Can you pick and choose which one you're going to do that for? That's what I'm worried about. And so there's so much, for the water drain, too many high-capacity wells are not good. If you talk to George Kraft, who is down in the groundwater center at UW-Stevens Point for years and years and years, says if you get too many high-capacity wells in an area, it will affect the water level because it won't be able to resurge or whatever you want to call it again fast enough. So that's the concern I have, is if you do it for one, do you do it for another? And you can't play favorites.
I would say two things to that, and then Supervisor Drabeck had something to add. My two things would be to that is that even if Vandergeest were to go through with this, and we did have several others that came to us for conduit bonding, the county does need to have a policy in place for how we treat these requests. And the other thing is that, I was surprised that there were 18 high-capacity wells in the presentation for the Vandergeest site. I was very surprised about that. Now, to Chair Gibbs's point, they are monitored, and they're permitted. So the DNR is doing that. So, Supervisor Drabeck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to bring up the point of policy, that we need to have a policy for everything. That if we do this, okay, does it just include, the digesters? Or does somebody come in and they want to buy a new big tractor, do we end up conduit bonding for that? I mean, where do we draw the line? If you follow, that may be ridiculous. The other thing does Vandergeest do no-till? Do they do like strip cropping? Do they do cover cropping? Because I think that's what we do in the Fenwood area, right? That's what is being encouraged. And to me, if we don't encourage Vandergeest to do the same thing, it sounds pretty hypocritical. So, just a thought.
Supervisor Shapinsky.
Thank you, Chair. My other question is, and maybe I'm just confused about what I've been hearing, but Town of Maine has zoning, is my understanding.
Village. That's big. Village.
Village.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Thank you. And so from that standpoint, and from some of the other things that I've been hearing from the DNR, do we actually have, under statute and authority, any realistic ability to regulate any of this? Or are we talking about an issue that we effectively have about 0.05% influence on?
I guess I would just add, and staff, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but, and even the administrator is raising his hand, but, because they incorporate into a village, they wouldn't be affected by our animal waste ordinance code. Matt disappeared. He tapped out. Christie's here too. But they can adopt the resolution to be under the animal waste ordinance, which are they essentially adopting it then? Essentially adopting the animal waste ordinance, but at least as it currently stands, the Village of Maine would not be able to regulate, and because they're a village, they're not under our purview. If they were a town yet, they would be affected by the animal waste ordinance. So, did anybody from staff have anything to add? Otherwise, I'm going to go to Chair Gibbs.
I think that's largely correct. The framework you laid out, the only linchpin that in my mind, I lawyer in recovery, right? I don't practice law actively now, and I'm not giving a legal opinion, but you do have kind of the arm you can twist is they want you to serve as the conduit issuer. So to the extent that is a tangible benefit, and to the extent should you say, hey, we're willing to do that, but we want A, B, C, and D to do that, that would be your, perhaps in your math, the 0.05 ability to exercise some control. But yeah, but I think
That
Kirsty
comes back
has,
to us specifically.
and I think Kirsty has some stuff on the
So
zoning.
Kirsty
Yeah.
and then Chair Gibbs.
And I was just going to build off of that, saying that some of those items that the DNR folks mentioned in the presentation, like, you can fill the digester with water all the way and see if anything is leaking, and you can install the monitoring wells around it to make sure that, nothing is leaking. That will never happen unless, probably someone asks them to do that, in terms of, just what Lance was just saying, if you are the conduit, you could ask them to go above and beyond what is required. So, one thing that, as conservationists makes us more nervous having it be an in-ground facility is, when Mark does his inspection around the CAFO, he does not do anything other than walk around the waste storage facilities. It's all you can do, right? You know, it's not like they're digging a hole and looking in ground. So if there was something there that the county asks for, like monitoring portals or wells to make sure that's safeguarded, I think that would be a huge advantage to have, because otherwise there's no way that's going to happen. There's no monitoring for the county. If something bad were to happen at the county would have no authority to do anything about it. Only the state of Wisconsin through the DNR. And it is a rare scenario when the DNR goes through enforcement currently.
And I think the framing, thank you, Kirsty. I think the framing that, given Kirsty's comments there, is that this is likely going to happen. Like, this is likely to be built. So I think we all need to think of that as well, as far as what impacts the county could have on the project that we could, the residents can benefit from, rather than having zero input at all, or 0.05% to Supervisor Shafinsky's estimate. All right, Chair Gibbs.
I was going to bring up and the same point that the administrator and Christie both brought up, that our negotiating stance is clearly only that if we choose to go down and say, yep, we'll be potentially the initial bond issuer, we then can negotiate potentially a monitoring well, or we could require something else. Now, or we could request that they require something else. Now, whether they agree to it is totally, again, a negotiating tactic. But if we choose not to, and if we choose to only say, okay, move it down to PFA, well, then it's just a yes or no vote. So all that we really have, and we don't have any leverage to require anything else.
Okay. Given that, like I said, with the idea that this is likely going to happen, I think, I guess my next question would be, does that policy discussion that we referred a little bit earlier about, as far as when we have these type of requests, do we need to have that discussion before we would make this decision? Chair Gibbs?
I wouldn't say it would have to happen before, but I think it needs to happen prior to us going to final approval. I think we need to have that developed and understand what the criteria is, and that before we do final approval, not the initial authorization, but the final approval would have to. I would say that would make sense.
So if we were to approve option 1, would that allow us to start talking with the group, to start talking about these concerns that we're having about what they might be willing to agree to? We're not agreeing with them to actually do it. Okay, that's big. Yeah. Other questions? I don't want to hog the microphone.
Basically, if we agree to the initial resolution, we're saying, yes, we're willing to talk to you about it. Let's start negotiating.
Which is better than no, and then I don't know what the construction phase is for a digester, but
Basically, we're cut out with
yeah, we do.
whatever they want.
Well, I don't know who said leverage. It might have been administrative leverage, but we would have none, right? Yeah. What happens here as far as any action that the ERC would take? Because I think HR Finance and EDC are also taking this item up, aren't they? Okay. And a standing committee can't trump another standing committee, so what does this process look like?
So if the ERC committee moves it to the full board, it'll go to the full board, regardless of whatever action, if there's some other action from the other two committees or other recommendations by the other two committees, those recommendations would also go to the board for its total consideration. So ERC could be on it alone and say, I'm moving it forward. I don't know that would be happening, but I would think the other two committees will actually have some kind of recommendation, at least, as it moves forward, based on the considerations that they're considering.
Did HR Finance make the request that ERC review the issue?
As I remembered, I think they requested that some of the environmental issues be understood and reviewed by ERC committee. Yes.
So do they want that information communicated back to them? I don't mean to keep looking at you. I'm just finding somebody that was at or reviewed the HR Finance request.
I think that you've looked at all of the things that they had concerns on that were brought up by HR Finance, and so they have that access to this information on this committee meeting. So,
yeah. Supervisor Stravinsky?
So then, is one of our courses of action, would it be proper to recommend approval of the initial agreement back to HR Finance rather than directly to the board?
You're going exactly where I was going, which is what does the process look like? So I guess, I don't know, Administrator Leonard or Chair Gibbs.
I mean, your motion to move it to wherever you choose to send it back to HR Finance with the information that was provided is fine.
Well, it either goes. So I guess, well, not to use the word too much.
But I would caution just one thing. If the concern that you want, if the committee wants to have the ability to do the negotiating, then I would suggest to the committee that the recommendation would be to the full board, because if you recommend it directly to HR Finance effectively could kill it if they chose not to move it forward.
Okay. Okay, well, we did what HR Finance asked of us, which is we reviewed the environmental matters. We talked about the ability for the county to have leverage during the process when initially we would have very little. The way that the county gets leverage, at least in my eyes, is that we do go forth with the initial resolution. Option one, I think, as the administrator put it. Okay. So
I think that's an accurate assessment.
okay, what would said motion? How would it need to be phrased?
Approval of the initial resolution and move it to the full board for its consideration.
Okay, would anybody like to make that motion?
I will
Supervisor
so
Stravinsky?
make that motion.
Okay, motion has been made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Zervensky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. All right.
Mr. Chair, not to belabor the point, but if anyone wanted to see what the initial resolution looked like, I did find it was actually in the executive committee packet from September 14th. And at that discussion, executive said, this sounds like it goes to three places: ERC, HR Finance, and Education Extension Economic Development.
So exec was the one that created the spider web?
Indeed it was.
Okay.
I believe you serve on exec.
I don't think I was at that meeting, though.
But September 14th is the
Okay.
packet.
All right. Very good. Thank you, Administrator. Thank you, staff. Appreciate it. I have to just take a moment to commend staff for reaching out to the DNR and getting them to speak here. Laura, you and I talked quite a bit this past week, so I appreciate it. Yeah. All right. Let's move on to item D, review and possible action. We have one, Stormwater Cooperative Agreement, 2024 to 2028.
And we have Jeff Pritchard online to explain the agreement and what we need to update here.
Okay, Jeff, whenever you're ready, if you want to take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I have the easy one here tonight. So the Stormwater Management Cooperative Agreement is an agreement that we update it's basically every 4 years. This agreement language is the same as previous agreements. The only difference would be obviously the term of the agreement, which would go from February 1st, 2024 to January 31st, 2028. And in terms of the parties involved, we as a coalition are growing. And we now have to include the Village of Plover and also the Wisconsin University of Stevens Point are now members of the coalition. Other than those changes, everything is the same. And of course it goes to promoting stormwater education, stormwater information, getting information out to the general public, and our ability as a group to self-fund these types of projects. We will be having a PSA coming out next month, I believe it is, for advertisements in terms of proper salt use. And then, of course, that changes in the spring and summer with our rubber ducky PSA for water quality issues. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have. But unfortunately, this is the easy one. It's an old standard typical agreement that we've seen before in the past.
Okay, any questions for Jeff? All right, Jeff, do you need a approval here, or what's the process?
Essentially, just approval of the resolution. When we're up against the wall, if you will, as it is terminating this month. So
okay,
hopefully we can get it approved by county board.
Okay, anybody like to make the motion to approve? Supervisor Ritter?
I will make the motion to approve the Stormwater Cooperative Agreement Resolution.
Motion is made. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Sherfinsky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. 7, educational presentations, outcome monitoring reports, committee discussion. A, department updates. CPZ, Park Rec, Forestry, Solid Waste. A1, Chapter 15, 21, and 22 updates. Garrett, go ahead.
Chad.
Shad, go ahead.
No worries. No worries. I just wanted to be real quick on this. I know we've been here a while. Essentially, all of the updates that we have, there's, with the exception of a few additions, are really just to make the ordinance more clear. So I'm going to start out with Chapter 15 and just run through. Again, the majority of them are just for clarity purposes. I'll just touch base on the ones that we're adding into the ordinance. And again, some of them are based off of clarity. We're adding a definition for public sewer just to be a little bit more clear on the intent of what public sewer is. We would be adding in an avenue for emergency holding tanks. We were told by the state that for emergency purposes, so if somebody has a collapsed tank or something like that, the historic practice was to issue a permit or issue basically authorization to go forward, and then we'd handle the permitting afterwards. We were informed by the state that no matter if it's an emergency or what, we still need to issue an official permit. So this is just giving us an avenue to kind of make that transition quick with the expectation that they'll meet all the requirements afterwards. It's just making it a little bit more clear in our code that there is a process for that. And then essentially, again, it's just clarity. There's one section here that we're just moving any land division which separates any POUTS component from a parcel where a structure served by those components is located, and it lists criteria. That was actually in an incorrect section where it didn't allow us to do anything, so we're just moving that into the correct section, which is to help prevent septic systems from being divided by a property line, and making sure that there's where the septic is where the individual who uses it is. That allows us to make sure it gets properly maintained, and if there is maintenance that needs to be done, that the individual can do the maintenance. Again, everything else is based off of just adding clarity, just little snippets, making the code a little bit more clear. Again, what we're looking at doing with Chapter 15 is this has to go to DISPUS to get their approval as well. So we still are waiting to hear back from them how they feel about it. If there are any amendments to that where they feel we're not, we either did something we couldn't or we need to add something else in, they'll let us know, and then we'll bring that back to you guys to let you know. Essentially, that's the Chapter 15 updates. Just real quickly. Again, there's nothing's drastically changing in the code. Just a lot of edits and removal of codes that don't exist anymore or got moved into a different statute. So if there's any questions on chapter 15, or I can move on to chapter 21.
Why don't you go ahead and do 21 and 22, and we'll take any questions at the end.
Yeah, sounds great. All right, so chapter 21, very easy update. In the table of contents, we realized we were missing a section in the table of contents. It was listed in our code, but not on the table of contents, so we're amending that. And then the next biggest thing is the statute of authority. We didn't have the clearest statute of authority listed in our code, so we're just updating it to a more relevant statute. And then the final one would just be that we have to change the date of adoption date when we adopt it. So that one's pretty simple. Nothing's changing drastically at all. It's just a few minor updates. Moving on to chapter 22. I don't have the edits in here right now. As discussed before, we were waiting for the model ordinance for chapter 22, but we were also planning to split out into a different chapter, the floodplain. We are currently working through that process. Right now, we're working through that process with DNR to try and make sure we have the flood studies we need. So before I brought the updates to you, I wanted to make sure that we had the updates completed. So that's kind of what we're waiting on like that. As far as a timeline for that goes, I really can't give a great timeline on it. It kind of depends on how quickly the back and forth between us and DNR can happen. I know
They were just here.
Yeah. I wish we could have handled some of that stuff then, for sure. A different department in the DNR. But yeah, so we'll work through those and then keep you guys posted as to where we are on that and bring those back to you when we have those ready.
All right, any questions on the update? All right. Lori, do you have something?
No, I'm ready for announcements.
Oh, okay, fair enough. All right, well, we'll get more information in the future. Yep. All right, seeing none, moving on to 8. We've got nothing. 9, next meeting, January 5th, 2024, 1 p.m. 1 p.m.
That's one of the announcements. As a reminder, it's Friday, January 5th at 1 p.m. because Tuesday, January 2nd is a county holiday. So.
Okay. Very good. 1
May I
p.m.
ask why 1 p.m. instead of the standard 3?
I believe it was because it's a Friday afternoon. So we felt instead of the 3 p.m., people might not want to be here at 3 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. Not us.
If that is a deviation from people's work schedules, and people can still call in. So just in case that's an issue for people. Okay. Assembly room and future agenda items. A, committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. B, announcements, requests, correspondence.
The only other announcement that I was going to make was that Rodney Roskopf is no longer on the ERC. He did step down as the FSA representative. There was a change in state statute related to that now directs that we get somebody in agricultural engagement. So we're working with Chair Gibbs and the Rules and Review and the Exec Committee for how we're going to replace that position. But we're not completely sure of the process or when it's going to get replaced yet. So, but I just wanted to note that he is no longer on the ERC.
Okay. Anything else? I got a couple. All right. 2 things. 1, if you're going out and getting your signatures, safe travels and everything. The other thing is Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everybody on the committee and other county board members as well as the staff. Thank you. All right, item 10. Motion by Supervisor Vensky, second by Supervisor Sherfinsky. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, staff.
Well, not that I really want to, but, I just want to hear somebody say no sometime to a vote.